The journey from Ponyville to Salt Lake City was long gone, but Fluttershy was more than happy to make it for her friend Rarity. It had been a few weeks since she had seen the Prompton fashion icon, and she was looking forward to the visit. But without a few temptations, she left Discord in charge of her animals while she was away. Something the animals feared would be turned disastrous. However, Fluttershy's concerns were not for the loved ones she had left behind, rather the loved ones she was going to see. Rarity had been distancing herself from her friends, and although she claimed it was a product of expansion, Fluttershy feared it was something else, something more troubling. Fluttershy had followed the map to the letter and paused right in front of an older-looking building not too far from the heart of the city. If she hadn't seen the coming soon sign out front, she wouldn't have believed this was the place. It was the modest, two-story building of a brick that had once been painted over a neutral white color. Much like the buildings nearby, however, the paint was chipping away to reveal the naked brick underneath, and the windows were fogged and cracked. The floor around the building was dead and overgrown with weeds. She had noticed how strange it seemed to be what a business would be standing alone when the lands around it seemed perfectly usable. Hesitantly, she walked upon the broken path of the decayed wooden door. Fluttershy had reached out her hoof to knock on the door, but she had heard it unlock from the opposite side and slowly opened. "Oh, Rarity?" Fluttershy asked, putting a hoof to the door and opening it further. It groaned in response and only opened partway to allow her to entrance. She didn't see her friend waiting on the other side of the door as she expected. She didn't even hear the familiar tinkle of magic. Confused, she looked around the main shop space and could only see boxes pressed up against the walls, flaking floral paper. "Fluttershy, is that you, darling?" Rarity's voice called from a distance, from where the upper level of the building. "Oh yes, it is me," Fluttershy said, as she squeezed her way inside. Knotting that pile was a few boxes that had been blocked from the door opening its entryway. Rarity spotted Fluttershy standing at the entrance as she trotted down the staircase to greet her. Even with the light gate, each step creaked, groaned under the pressure. "It's so good to see you!" Rarity embraced her friend with a hug. "It's good to see you too. I'm so sorry no pony else can make it with me." Fluttershy returned the hug, feeling compelled to apologize for her behalf. "Nonsense! We all have our lives to attend to after all. I can't expect my friends to drop everything and help me ready for the new boutique every time I choose to expand," Rarity said with a smile. "Besides, our friends will all take turns, and you're the first, and I'm pretty sure we'll make light work out of it." Fluttershy softly smiled back and nodded until Rarity had turned away. Then her expression shifted one of concern. Now that she was inside the potential boutique, her initial feeling of concern was more warranted. Rarity had boxes piled on boxes, and many of them were precautiously perched up on the other. The wooden rafters above looked brittle and ready to snap at any moment's notice. Pony mannequins were disassembled and strewn about, and the only visible dresses that hung from a single shack towards the back of the room. Fluttershy noted that she had more outfits and her closet than Rarity had already displayed, but there was a single sewing desk and an armory with the pieces that still needed to be assembled. However, there were some comforting homey touches that brought a little smile to Fluttershy's face. Rarity's fainting on the couch was just right in front of guests to have their own dramatic moments. Pictures of Rarity's other fashion adventures were hung around the room, attempting to mask peeling the bare wall. There was one picture that stuck out to Fluttershy, though, a picture of all of her friends after their first adventure. It was nice to see Rarity still remembered that she had ponies who truly cared about her. Are you sure we can get this place ready in time for the new summer sensational collection? It seems like a bit of work that needs to be done," Fluttershy asked. "Summer sensational? No. This year I'm expanding my country chic collection. Besides, I'm not afraid to get my hooves a little dirty for the sake of fashion. This place does need a little extra TLC, I'll admit, but it's a complete bargain. Not to mention the fact that it's a walking distance from the main square. I really lucked out on this one. Rarity reassured, as she levitated the box with her magic and tore off the tape. Oh well, I'll certainly do my best to help you. Fluttershy chimed in cheerfully, trotting to Rarity's side, ready for her first task. Wonderful! If you could be so kind as to help me unload this sewing supplies to these cupboards and dressers over there, I'd be much appreciated. Of course, Fluttershy agreed as she followed Rarity's example and picked up the unopened box to sort. Unpacking was a tedious chore. Fluttershy and Rarity both felt each moment slowly tick by with no apparent end in sight. They kept a light conversation, going to distract themselves from the mundane tasks at hoof. But Fluttershy made sure that the topics remained casual. Since she had last seen her, she wasn't so sure how really gauge what Rarity was feeling. But she wasn't one to press the matter. Once a pair of them had spent their energy, Rarity lit her horn and laid out the spread of berries and pastries for them to eat. I do apologize for the lack of adequate lighting. This place wasn't wired for a few new illumination technology. It's over 200 years old, in fact, Rarity informed her. Oh, I don't mind, Fluttershy fibbed. She already knew the real cause of discomfort didn't come from the lack of light, but rather the cold of the musty room. Rainstorms were keeping the pleasant weather at bay for the moment. Searching the room for a solution, her eyes fell upon an old stone fireplace. Nearly petrified pieces of timber laid ready, begging for a match to warm them. Even so, Fluttershy averted her gaze and said nothing, allowing Rarity to come up with her own solutions. She had always been overcomingly accommodating despite her own needs to distract herself, as she kept the conversation going. What kind of store this was back then? A barber shop, back when Salt Lake City was first founded. Eventually it got turned into an all manner of things, a doctor's office, a floral shop, and even a private detective's headquarters. You could see the evidence of this history around the place. That wallpaper, for instance, was probably not used since this was a flower shop. But it's fascinating, isn't it? A place with such history has so much to overfill me with inspiration. It's one of my secrets to a successful business, darling. Fluttershy nodded, unable to respond with her mouth full of pastry. I spent most of my time organizing the rooms, the bedroom, the bathroom, and the like. Eventually, I will use them as storage or perhaps bulk of sewing. But we would need somewhere to live for the now. Come. Rarity magically gathered her remaining uneaten food and stored it away, pointing the stairs for Fluttershy to follow. The advance of the building changed for the worse for Fluttershy. Once they made their way upstairs, the sun had set. The old place moaned and whined from the lightest breeze. It was then she really noticed how jarringly frightening the sound of stair creaks were. Fluttershy knew it was that old wood that had the tendency of falling apart if not properly maintained. And this isn't looking too promising. Rarity didn't seem to notice. However, as she trotted up the stairs confidently, Fluttershy chose to fly instead. You don't mind sharing a bed, do you? I'm afraid I only have one. The couch is an option as well, but I'm not sure how comfortable that will be for you. Don't worry, I don't mind sharing the bed. I did it all the time at home with Angel Bunny, and he was a bit of a blanket hog. Fluttershy giggled. Rarity smiled warmly and pushed open the bedroom door. The bedroom was much smaller compared to the main floor of the house. It was barely big enough to fit a bed, dresser, and Rarity many dozens of luggage pieces. Fluttershy wasn't so sure how she could find a specific bag in the chaos, but Rarity magicked up her nightly Regine schedule without even blinking an eye. Through the murky window, Fluttershy spotted a blot of lightning from the fast approaching spring rainstorm. She had been already fulfilled her frights for the evening and burrowed herself in bed. Fluttershy's only comfort came from Rarity's chipper humming as she was rolling the curls into her mane. Fluttershy needed a better distraction for herself, so even though she didn't plan to, she decided to pry a little. "It's been a while since most of Ponyville has seen you. How have you been?" "Busy, always busy. I have so many boutiques now that I can hardly keep them straight. Rarity for you was almost completely out of their spring collection after the first 3 days, and the boutiques in Canterlot and Hoofington ran into some technical problems, I suppose. I cannot complain, though I like being kept on my hooves," Rarity said. "And what about you? How are things in Ponyville?" Fluttershy was taken aback by Rarity's response. She was expecting some hesitation, or maybe some defensiveness, but not complete confidence. She realized too late that Rarity had asked her a question in return, and hurriedly responded, "They're managing as well as any pony can expect, but it's not the same though." "Good. I'll have to make sure to visit. Once I'm not busy, of course. I'm sure Yana is more capable of holding down the fort while I'm away," Rarity said, climbing into bed. "Every pony misses you, especially Sweetie Belle." Fluttershy hesitated. "She says you haven't been riding back. She's really worried about you." "Oh well, then the mail must have gotten lost," Rarity blurted. "Anyway, I'm rather tired. I have a big day ahead of me tomorrow. Good night, Fluttershy." She lowered her face mask over her eyes, turned away from her friend. Fluttershy watched Rarity settle in, a worried expression still clearly stamped on her face. How was it that she could remain so calm and collected? She knew that every pony worked through problems at their own pace, but Rarity's complete lack of emotional attachment was not something Fluttershy was used to seeing from her friend. Even so, Fluttershy knew it was only a matter of time before Rarity cracked, and then she worried that no pony would be there to pick up the pieces when it happened. Endless days of drudgery and exhaustion crawled by for Rarity. It seemed that for her the universe was disrupting her at her every turn. The entire box of fabric was destroyed when a leak from the roof soaked overnight. A rotted piece of the ceiling support crashed into one of Rarity's sewing machines, and there was a faint odor of mold in the air emanating from the unknown source. The only thing that seemed to be getting worse at the time when she had with Fluttershy came to an end. After a hasty and tearful goodbyes, Rarity threw herself back into work. She wasn't expecting another helping hoof for a few days, so she wanted to finish what could be done as soon as possible. For the moment, Rarity decided that she was tired of seeing the plastic limbs lying around her floor like a crime scene. She planned to assemble all the mannequins that had just finished, the first when she heard the little bell from the storefront, which signaled some pony's arrival. "Terribly sorry, but we are closed for the season. Come back this summer for my La Pomme boutique. Country tricks grand unveiling," Rarity called, trotting over to meet the unexpected guest. But as she trotted, she realized that the gust of fresh air had blown in, only temporarily to mask the stench of mold that lingered around her. "I'm not too sure I could wait that long," Applejack said, smiling and winking at Rarity from the entrance. Rarity stopped in her tracks, her jaw on the floor, standing right next to the doorframe. Her forehooves crossed, a familiar orange pony smiled from ear to ear. Emerald eyes glistened under the old Stenson hat that Rarity had grown to love to hate to love. She found her footing again and raced to her friend's side, pulling her to a tight hug. "Applejack, How?" her voice crackled. "Well, Fluttershy said you'd pick up a doozy for a house to repair, so I figured you might need an old apple's help to fixing it up." "But I don't understand. I thought Rainbow Dash was supposed to—" "Oh, never mind. I've been working so hard, I must have scrambled a few details. Of course I could use the help. You're just the handy pony I need to get things moving a little more smoothly. Starting with the horrendous mold smell," Rarity said, leading Applejack inside. "Woo-wee, that's mighty powerful," Applejack said. Fanning her hat, she casually shut the door, unwillingly cutting off the supply of fresh air. "Is it? Oh dear, perhaps I had gotten used to it. Customers wouldn't dream of buying clothing from a shop with mold, Rarity complained, her ears flattening against her head. Leave that to me, Rares, Applejack reassured, with a wink as she moved towards the boxes stacked against the far side of the wall. Rarity mused that she had rarely had given Applejack a direct order for her to do what she needed. Still beaming up at the arrival of some help, she pulled her attention away after a moment to continue setting up the mannequins. Oh yeah, fixed it, Applejack said, calling from behind her. What's that? Rarity asked, her mind far from her. I'd recognize that train wreck from a mile away. I can't believe I thought I would look for a gala. Applejack noted with a chuckle. Rarity turned to face her, confused by her statement, until she turned back to see the first assembled mannequin fully dressed. She was entranced by it, perfected and ready for display. The demi-gown was extended with the same red hue from the original hat that had been replaced with a red Stetson with a gold trim, a worthy upgrade to one insisted on wearing. The goulashes were long gone, having been replaced by cow-pony boots and a similar gold flare. Even the original plaid had made its way back to the design, but it was now fashioned into a vest. Apple embroidery work lined the bottom of the skirt, and had a small stitched apple accentuated the hat. The assemble came together exactly how she pictured it, but she still couldn't help but wonder when she assembled it into its entirety. Oh yes, well, I try not to let any of my work go to waste. She intended on continuing, but when she turned around, Applejack had vanished. Applejack? Down here! A muffled voice called from somewhere underneath the floorboards. Rarity's eyes widened in confusion. There was no mention of a basement when she purchased the property. She looked around for a door, leaned down, but found no one. Applejack? How did you get down here? She called, but before she could reply, she found a small hatch in the floor between some boxes. She ignited her horn, expecting to open strenuously, but it refused to budge. Frustrated, she increased the intensity of the spell, which strained her, still producing no results. She then released the spell and stamped her forehoof with a huff. How in Equestria did a pony lift this? She grumbled to herself, a tad jealous of Applejack's strength. She glanced around the room for another solution, but found one sticking out of the toolbox beside her sewing desk. She victoriously magicked a crowbar to come to her aid. Aye, comin'? Applejack hollered. Just a minute, having a bit of trouble with the door, Rarity answered, jamming the crowbar in the crack between the door and the floor. Once again her spell proved useless as she strained against the stubborn door. Giving up at last, Rarity stomped the crowbar with her hoof. The hatch finally buckled and popped open enough for her to use her magic to do the rest. She congratulated herself with a ha! Y'all had to do what was asked, Applejack retorted smugly, leaning against the door at the wall at the base of the stairs, having watched the struggle. Nonsense! I got it well enough, and it won't be stuck again after all, she said, tossing the crowbar aside. Come look at this, Applejack insisted, trotting away from the stairs. Rarity's magic quickly illuminated drearily and disheveled collection of odds and ends littered about the room. On one wall, she could make out an old wooden writing desk. It was surrounded by stacks of old, musty boxes that were covered in years of dust. Scattered about the floor was an assortment of gardening pots and bags of fertilizer. No doubt the common sight from these days was a building opening up its doors to a floral shop. There were also looked to be paintings of furniture, another corner draped with white cloth covers to protect from dust and grime. In the center of the room stood a lone barber chair, sprung and stuffing poking out the seats of the cushion. Boxes varying levels of wear and decay were stacked up on top of one another, with their contents spilling over the sides. Many items looked unsecure from such box towers. One round move in the picture frame of a chandelier, a china set, or a lantern would fall. She carefully navigated around the mess until she saw that lantern had lit itself up. She flinched backwards, startled, directly into a large patch of cobwebs. "Ah! Get it off of me! Get it off of me!" Rarity screamed, fussing around with the cobwebs. Applejack sighed and helped her brush her off her mane. "It's just cobwebs, Rare. They ain't gonna hurt ya." "Cobwebs? Perhaps not, but spiders! Those things are delightfully helpful star spiders of Fluttershy's. They would be venomous, or could be, for this part of the country." Rarity theorized the exasperation. "Now what is it that you found?" Applejack pointed on the wall on the opposite side of the basement, where the sunlight filtered in the weakly from the small grate in the ceiling. Upon closer inspection, Rarity was surprised to find piles of newspaper neatly stacked against the brick. "Ain't that picture of you?" Applejack pointed out, referring to the newspaper on top of the pile. Rarity skeptically picked it up with her magic and read the article aloud. "Canterlot's rising star Rarity from Ponyville designed a hot new trend in a simple elegance which she debuted at Canterlot Garden Party this past weekend. This is the article that Canterlot Times wrote about the gown I made for Twilight's birthday." Rarity realized, in astonishment. "Oh yeah, the one where you kept trying to ditch us for your fancy friends," Applejack implied, a twinge of bitterness in her tone. Rarity recoiled. "If you recall, I did come to my senses at the end," she muttered back defensively. "And look at this one about your Canterlot boutique opening up." Applejack examined one of the papers next to the first one. "Let me see that," Rarity demanded, taking the paper from Applejack with her magic. She glossed over the review, recalling the disastrous debacle of the princess dress. "Huh? Where are the odds of that? Who would keep a bunch of Canterlot newspapers in Salt Lake City anyway?" Applejack wondered out loud. Looking over the rest of the newspapers on the pile, Strike that. I'm seeing some more of Ponyville, too. Something more recent, in fact." "Recent?" Rarity squeaked, taking Ponyville, the Chronicle with her magic, and reading the date on the corner. Her heart had stopped and her breath stilled, but without thinking, she tossed it into the pile like if it was on fire, causing the other newspapers to cascade around her hooves. She took a sharp inhale and composed herself as best she could. "What is it? What's wrong? No, it's not possible!" Rarity's voice was tinged in terror. It's from a year ago." "So? Was there something wrong with it?" Applejack asked, looking for the way of disarray. "No!" Rarity shouted in near hysteria. She regained her outburst before continuing. "Sorry to be frazzled, darling. I'm just really upset. This place was supposed to be abandoned over a year ago. Boarded up and locked tight. No pony allowed in. The realtor assured me that after the Red Herring owned this place, that pony came near it." "Who's Red Herring?" Applejack asked, in confusion. "I believe he was a private detective. Maybe he just left some of his old casework behind. You said it was abandoned years ago, and that's when the papers dated. So, you don't understand. Red Herring was... well, he died here more than 5 years ago," Rarity counted. "Wait, what?" "Well, this might sound a bit insensitive, but Red Herring was found having hung himself from the rafters." "Land's sake, are you kidding me? This is where you're setting up your shop?" Applejack shouted in surprise. "The retailer assured me that it was kept from the papers. Only the select few were aware of the tragedy. There's no point in passing up the lecture of opportunity because of a bad PR," Rarity pointed out. "Well, what happened? Was he depressed? Was he running from something? Some pony?" "What you have to understand about this, Applejack, is that ponies around here will believe anything. Quite frankly, I'm not even sure if any of this is true." "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, the pony I purchased the building from informed me that this has some sort of reputation. Some ridiculous ponies in town seem to think it's haunted. Can you imagine?" she said, laughing it off. "Red Herring was a distinguished private investigator, and he was determined to debunk all spooky rumors about this place. The realtor did mention was a bit recluse, but he kept it mostly to himself and would lock himself inside for days, working on some case or another. It's a terrible tragedy, but it's hardly haunting. And you don't believe in ghosts? Applejack asked, with a sarcastic smirk. Of course not, I don't. Don't be obscured. Leave that to me to show these ponies a thing or two about superstitious nonsense, Rarity said dismissively. So then, how do you suppose Ponyville Chronicle ended up there? Maybe it was all elaborate prank? A ruse as some of our friends are playing on us, perhaps? It would explain why the articles are about me. She rationalized as best she could. Even so, I don't really plan on staying in the dusty basement all afternoon. I should get back to unpacking the rest of the boxes. Without another word, Rarity led Applejack out of the basement before firmly shutting the door and latching it. Whoa! Applejack muttered. Whoa, what, Apple? Rarity startled, but cut herself when she saw the state on the main floor. In the sort of span of time that they'd been in the basement, Rarity's floor had been completely finished and properly organized. Pony mannequins lined the south wall each with their own gout or assembled that was near completion. Her sewing supplies were also stacked in perfection and organized by color. The large armoire had been stores of fabric tucked away, along with her ancient pieces and her accessories. She wasn't so sure how to feel at the moment. She was delighted to ease the burden that was welcome feeling. However, there was that element of shock and confusion, mixed with uncertainty from the lack of explanation. What? Who could have had this happen? Magic? Applejack summarized. Who, however, did you come up with this brilliant idea? Rarity asked sarcastically. Well, at least we now know it was one of our friends. My money's on Rainbow Dash, but although she doesn't have magic. Twilight perhaps? What makes you think it was our friends? Even with magic, it could have taken all afternoon to empty those boxes. Not if there were more than one pony. I just figured it out, Applejack. You're sweet. Rarity threw her hooves all around in one hug. Say what now? The surprise party. Let me guess. All of her friends lied and they said they were too busy to help. In fact, they were just planning to surprise me all along. They sent you here early to distract me in the basement, long before all this was set up, did they? She swirled around the room, calling out to her friends. Come on out, every pony. Was this one of your brilliant plans, Pinkie Pie? She turned to Applejack. You must have planned one of those papers so you could discover them. You ponies are the best friends a mare could ask for. Smash. A single frame picture had fallen from its place on the wall, shattering to pieces on the ground near Rarity and Applejack. The air jumped. It stared at it incredulously. Ugh, be careful. Which one of you knocked down this loose? The rust's up, you know. You can come out now. Rarity shouted, trotting over to the broken shard on the floor. Oh no, not this one, she whispered under her breath. She levitated the two torn pieces away from the broken glass shards and held them up together for Applejack to see. It was the first photograph that she and her friends had taken together, with Twilight Sparkle in the center, surrounded by all of her friends. Now Twilight and Fluttershy had been torn in half. One piece showed Rarity with Pinkie Pie, and the other showed Applejack with Rainbow Dash. Would you look at that? It's strange to see Twilight looking so normal like that. Applejack nodded as Twilight didn't have her alicorn wings yet. It's completely ruined. I can't mend this. And it was my only copy. Ow! Rarity squealed, jumping back when she advertently stepped on a shard of glass. Rarity, are you alright? It's just a little scratch. Oh no, the blood! It will stain the floor! I'll be back, ponies! Rarity hurried past Applejack, up the wooden stairs to the bathroom to the top floor. I'm not seeing any signs of any pony else down here, Applejack called after her. Rarity tread as lightly as she was able to, trying to keep any blood from spilling on from her scratch. It wasn't painful, very inconvenient. She turned on the sink once she made it up to the bathroom and waited for the water to warm up a little. Her mind wandered on to the picture where her friends were hiding and how they planned and to announce their arrival. but of course she was grateful to have ponies like them in her life. Ponies that would drop everything to be there for her, no matter what the cost, especially Applejack, who was always there for her when she needed it the most. It may have been some time since they last talked. How long had it been? The water boiled over her hoof and Rarity screamed. She ripped her foreleg away and cradled to her chest. Her unburned hoof scrambled to turn off the faucet. "Rarity, are you alright?" Applejack yelled, rushing up to creaking steps to come to her aid. I'm alright. I must have turned the wrong knob. It's not bad, really," Rarity answered, examining the fur now matted firmly against her skin. It would leave a mark, but nothing is permanent. She counted herself lucky. Creak. "Aha! We finally caught you!" Rarity rejoiced, delighted to have fully proof that somebody else was there. She and Applejack made their way up to the top of the stairs to greet them, but saw no pony. "Where did they go?" Applejack asked. "That's odd. I could have sworn I heard a creak." Rarity stopped for a second when the second creak was heard. This one was closer than the first. "Are you sure this is our friends doing?" Applejack asked, a quiver in her voice. "Creak." "Don't be silly, Applejack. Of course it is. They're just playing around a ridiculous prank, that's all. Isn't that right on Rainbow Dash?" Creak. "This isn't funny, y'all," Applejack called. "Tell her." A voice no louder than a whisper caressed her ears, subtitled breath grazing their necks. "Run!" Applejack called out, racing away from the stairs with Rarity close at hoof. "This ain't possible. There has to be an explanation here, Applejack. Here, the bedroom." Rarity flung open the door with her magic and skid inside to safety. Applejack was close behind, slamming it shut and locking it securely before anything could follow. As an extra measure, she pressed her body against the door. "It's magic. It has to be. Pinky must be in this. Although why would they think scaring the daylights out of us is entertaining us is beyond me." Rarity grumbled, pacing back and forth in her room while her horn kept illuminated. "Maybe it's about time we start considering the possibility that it ain't our friends and might be some kind of other presence." "Oh, you're being ridiculous," Rarity insisted, saying more for her benefit than Applejack's. She tried to keep her focus on mind. The voice from the stairs playing in her head, it sounded familiar, important. Before she could pin her thoughts down, the smell of mold and rot rippled through her nostrils, causing her to scrunch her snout and eyes to the water. "Oh my, how much is that smell could permeate my every part of this place? You really think it wouldn't be so strong from this far from the source?" Rarity trotted over to the window still, air to the room, but stopped short when her eyes caught the scene by the panes. "That's odd." "What's odd?" "Well, I'm pretty sure it was a clear weather today, but now it seems nothing but a thick fog. I can't even see the ground. Maybe we should go back out there and—" Applejack stumbled forward, landing on her knees as someone or something began ramming the door with the force of an Ursa Major. The room shuddered with vibrated with each strike, like inside the bell that struck. With every blow, the vibrations intensified. "Out the window!" Applejack screamed as she tried to rise to her hooves. Rarity didn't protest, bracing herself against the frame, mustering all the focus and strength to lift the window pane with her magic and hooves. "Let me help," Applejack said, finally making it to the window side of the room. She planted her hind hooves firmly and pushed against the lower frame with all of her might. The pair of them struggled with the frame while trying to keep their footing. The force on the other side of the door increasingly in power and tempo with every second that passed. They could hear the frame and wood of the door begin to pop and splinter. One nail coming out with such force that buried itself so deep for head first into the frame, scant inch from Rarity's cheek, making her jump and scream. "Focus, Rares!" Applejack exclaimed, gritting her teeth. "It's starting to give. One more push!" One more final push in illusion, fueled by terror and fear. The window gave away and slid up with force to crack the frame in one pane. A large piece of the door exploded inward, shattered on impact against the far wall, and raining bits of wood around the room. "It's coming!" Rarity screamed. already standing on the windowsill, peering over into the thick fog that rolled and clustered on the wall mere feet from the building. "Climb! Climb!" Applejack screamed as she followed her out the window. Rarity clung to the vine, praying it had the strength to support her body weight. She hyperventilated, tears stinging her eyes as she clung to the frozen side of her house. Applejack's voice pierced in hysteria. "Y'all have to keep climbing, Rarity." "Oh, why couldn't I have just learned to teleport like Twilight?" she wailed, lamentating her lack of magic skill. Rarity's sobs stuck between the terrors and the situation. The thoughts in her head. They slowly progressed down the side house, mutually silent to keep focus on the task at hoof. A minute passed, or it had been two. In her terror, the only thing Rarity could register in this oppressive fog was the pounding of her heart and the ragged labor breaths that ever came, ever harder with the continuing effort. Shouldn't they have just reached the bottom by now? Shouldn't we have reached the ground by now? Applejack wondered out loud. My thoughts exactly. What in the... Applejack trailed off. Hey, Rare, do you see that window? On what? The one that terrifying monster being down the door trying to kill us? Why on earth would I want to look at that? Applejack sighed in frustration. Because it's gone. There's nothing up there with a crepe, brick, and vine. What in the question do you mean it's gone? Rarity asked, a hint of frantic terror creeping back to her voice. She peered and strained in her eyes to look past the orange mare, who was still dangling a foot above her, only to have been greeted with the vertical expanse of the brick and mortar, extending beyond the sight, melting into a ceiling of the fog. That can be. She cast her eyes downward, looking towards the ground. She knew he had to be there, but she saw nothing, except an endless trail of overgrown plants clinging onto the monstrous brick facade below. This here is supposed to be a two-story, right? Well, three if you include the basement. But even still, a fall from that window wouldn't have killed us. Well, by Celestia, it sure looks like it will by now, Rarity cried in frustrated terror. I don't think Celestia has anything to do with what we are doing now, Applejack snapped back. Look there, just below us a window. If we can sneak inside, it's just a matter of making it to the front door. Rarity looked again, spotted anomaly. She didn't question or wait for Applejack. Hastily scaling down the wall towards their salvation, her muscles screamed in every inch as she maneuvered down the last few to the window. To her relief was ajar. She climbed inside, keeping as quiet as possible as to not alert their attacker. Once she was safe, she turned to assist Applejack. Rarity turned to face the room and gasped as her eyes, darting back and forth while her mind raced with questions. What are you doing? Applejack whispered as she stood, but stopped herself when she came to a terrible realization. The room they were standing in was the same that they had left since their absence. However, the room had been ransacked. The bed turned over, suitcases open, lying awkwardly around the room with their contents spilled onto the floor, blankets, pillows shredded. Most notably disturbing was a smattering fresh bloody hoof prints, splayed chaotically near the shattered remains of the door. The pair silently navigated through the mess, frightened that the minor misstep would give away their position. They successfully ducked underneath the remain of the door, the top third that hung from an angle remaining hinged. It crept closely around the hallway towards the staircase. Applejack leaned in closely, whispering only loud enough for Rarity to hear. We have to make a break for it. Let's go, Rares! Applejack took her hoof, and the pair began to gallop down the stairs. On the fourth step, Rarity's hoof burst through the rotten wood and up to her hock. She screamed in shock and agony, shifting her weight into her front hooves, hoping that they would propel her out. Her leg got caught in the mouth of the broken step, trapped beneath the series of jagged wooden teeth that pierced her skin. Rarity! Applejack shouted, spinning around and trying to pull her loose. No, it hurts! Rarity screamed, ripping herself away from Applejack's grasp. Splinters! They're everywhere! I'm stuck! Well, what do I do? Applejack screamed in panic, her eyes darting around, hoping to not find whatever intruder might be on their trail. I have to pull them out, Rarity concluded, her voice and hooves trembling. She ignited her own horn and squeezed her eyes shut, focusing on the very first many wooden fragments, sticking it awkwardly out of her back leg. As her magic slowly pried the first from her flesh, a wave of nausea washed over as warm blood streamed down her wound to her fetlock. A strand shard dropped to the ground. Rarity let out a muffled whimper of pain. "You have to try to keep quiet. We don't know where they are," Applejack whispered sadly. Having seen the look of Rarity's pain on the face and being unable to stop it, beads of sweat rolled off Rarity's cheeks, and her magic took off the next shard. The one provide worse than the first. Breaking it too would get caught on the flesh on its way out. She gritted her teeth and squeezed her mouth shut as the white-hot pain bore into her mind. "That's the last one," she whispered, her voice breaking with a sob after pulling out the last of the dozen fragments. They lay on a small pile, ranged from an inch all the way up to 4 inches in length. Applejack reached for her again. With the assistance of her own magic, Rarity slowly pulled free. The pair had continued down the steps, Rarity hobbling and avoiding contact with her hoof as best as she was able to. At last they reached the front door. Applejack turned the knot with the hoof, only to find it resent.